Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today is very exciting because I'm setting up my new bullet journal for 2023. Now, as you can see, I got another bullet journal from Archer and Olive, but this one is actually a bit special because they sent it to me as a gift for being an affiliate, so I'm really grateful and I've actually had it for quite some time, so I was super excited to finally get to use it. This is the limited edition ampersand design with their logo on the front, and it's an A5 journal with 160 pages that are 160 GSM, which means that they're nice and thick, and of course it also has an elastic band, a pen loop, and 2 bookmarks as always. I actually think my journal from this year and this new one look really pretty together since they're both white, but this new one has a different material, so it's not a linen cover like my old one, but it has this kind of like fake leathery texture, which I think is also really nice. Just as a heads up, this video will be a bit longer than my usual ones, but I tried to cut out anything that's too repetitive, so I hope you don't mind. And I also wanted to include my 2022 flip through at the beginning, so if you would like to skip this part, I'll put the timestamp on the top somewhere and also in the description. But yeah, so I had my little grid spacing guides in the front, and I might just end up using them in my new bullet journal because they're quite useful. And then looking back at my 2022 spreads, I actually think they're still really pretty. I kept them super simple, and spoiler, I'm doing a pretty simple setup again for the next year because I think the yearly setup is all about being practical. And I also don't want to include a ton of pages because they just end up staying empty otherwise. I think overall this year definitely had some of my all-time favorite themes, and it's always so fun to look back and see how much your style changes over the span of the year. In general, I have adapted a pretty minimal and simple style of bullet journaling, and I'm super happy about it because I've never actually used my journal as much as I have this year. In the past, I always took a month off and lots of my weekly spreads just ended up staying empty, and I think it was mostly due to them being too much work. So yeah, maybe if you find yourself not really using your journal or feeling like it doesn't actually make your life easier, then consider switching things up and simplifying it down to its basic structure. For example, I also never include something like a mood tracker anymore. I've tried them in the past, but I either just fill them out with the same thing every day, or I don't end up filling them out at all. And of course, that's just my personal experience. I'm sure that a lot of other people find them super helpful, but of course not every spread is the right thing for everyone. And that's why I think experimenting is a great way to find out what works best for you. At the same time, if you look at my setups, especially towards the end of the year, the layouts really never changed that much, and for me that has been working so much better, but someone else might get bored of having the same structure every month. So I just want to encourage anyone new to bullet journaling, and also those of you who have been journaling for a while, to take this time at the end of the year to kind of reflect on how your bullet journal has been working for you this past year, and what you actually want to achieve with your journal in the next year. Whether that be organizing your life in general, staying on track with your habits, tracking your emotional and physical health, and so on. Anyway, I think my December theme was definitely a highlight in terms of color palettes for me, and at the time of filming I still had 3 more weekly spreads to do, and for me it pretty much always works out perfectly with the amount of pages, so this year I only have 1 extra page. And that's it for this flip through, so let's move on to my new 2023 setup. For me, the color palette can really make or break a setup, so I chose some neutral but cute colors, 2 greens, a coral orange, and a very light peachy shade. Of course, I'm also using my Muji gel pen and a Tombow Fudenosuke for the doodles. For this year, I also really wanted to use these cute alphabet stamps from StationeryPal, and the products will of course be listed in the description. So first things first, I like to put a washi tape underneath the left side of the journal because it can be kind of annoying in the beginning when it doesn't lie flat. And then of course it's time to write my name on the first page, which I always find so nerve-wracking even though I pretty much never look at it. By the way, Tina is only my nickname for Christine, so you can call me either one, I really don't mind. And then my username across all platforms is Ardenbujos, so that's for YouTube, Instagram, and my Etsy shop. And then I always skip that very first page because it's kind of glued together a bit, so I'm starting my 2023 setup on the next 2 pages. The first thread I'm making is a key, and for those of you who are new to bullet journaling, a key is just a place where you can write down some symbols that you want to use throughout your journal. I used the light peach and the light green as a background for the definitions, and then on the top I used the stamps for the header. Then I wrote down all the symbols and what they mean, so I use a circle for simple tasks. When they're completed, I color them in. When I have to move them to a different day, I draw a small arrow on the left, and I cross them out when they get cancelled. I mark important tasks with a little square, birthdays with a star, events with a dash, and notes with a dot. By the way, these symbols are mostly from the original creator of the bullet journaling system, Ryder Carroll, so I would highly suggest checking out his videos. I'll leave a link to it in the description. For decoration, like I mentioned, I like to keep things pretty simple, so I decided on some little floral doodles, which is always my go-to, and I think they work great for yearly setups because they're not super specific to a season. Moving on to my 2023 cover page, I wanted to make it a bit bigger than I did last year because the page ended up looking a bit too empty to me. So I first drew these blobs with the markers as a background, which will be a reoccurring theme throughout this video, and I made sure to alternate between the three lighter colors, and I only used the dark green for borders. To make the title stand out, I looked for a cute font on Pinterest, and I found these numbers which I thought looked super pretty, so I sketched them out and tried to recreate them as good as I can. I thought this bold lettering fit in really well with the stamps I used because they both have a kind of similar feel. I used my Muji gel pen to outline the numbers first because I feel like it gives me more control, and then I definitely took my time with this because there's really no need to rush. Then I used my Tombow Fudenosuke to fill it all in, and I switched to it because it's really nice and dark, and it's also a bit quicker than with a thin gel pen, but it still took me quite some time, so I hope you enjoy this time lapse. Once that was finished, I wanted to add just a few doodles on the side, so I went for a simple leaf design and a little flower, which are both super easy to draw. And then if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I love to fill in empty spaces with little stars and dots, because to me it makes a spread feel so much more finished. On the top I also used the stamps again to write hey, and then I added a border all around with the dark green shade, which I think pulls it all together and makes it feel cohesive. And that's it for my first two pages. I love how they turned out, and let's move on to the next spread, which will be a simple yearly overview. I personally use my phone calendar a lot more for events happening throughout the year, but I still wanted to have an overview. Usually I wrote down all the birthdays here, but this time I decided I could write down my highlights of each month because I thought that would be super nice to look back on. I split the page into thirds horizontally and in half vertically so that all the 12 months fit on 2 pages, and then I alternated between the 3 lighter shades again to draw a circle for each month on the top. I decided to just write the number of each month because I wanted to incorporate the style of the lettering from the cover page, so I just used the Tombow Fudenosuke to write them on the circles. To make them as even as possible, I used the dark grids as a guide for the height and the width, and I had them sketched out as well before. Again, I used that same reference from Pinterest, so if you're ever looking for pretty lettering ideas, I would definitely recommend searching there. If you do mess up a little bit like I did for February or for December, you can hide it pretty well with a white gel pen. Next I'm using the Muji gel pen for some more plant doodles around the circles, so I alternated between the leaves and the little flowers, and I think it looks so cute, especially when I added the small details later, so that just shows that you don't have to be super good at drawing to make a pretty spread. I always try to make my setups pretty easy to recreate because otherwise why am I even sharing them, so I hope this can give you some inspiration for your own journal. And sorry about the footage being blurry here and there, I forgot to turn off the autofocus. I used the dark green again to make a border just on the top and the bottom of the sections, and I left a space in between them because that's the best way I can make them fit with a mini calendar. I purposely didn't add a border in between them vertically because I wanted to have some more white space, and I feel like it would have been too cramped otherwise. Then for the mini calendars, which are always the most tedious part of a yearly overview, I first switched between the 3 colors again for the background of the weekdays, and I always used a different color than for the header so that it doesn't get too boring. And to spare you the boredom of watching me write down 365 dates, I cut it pretty short. So yeah, I just wrote the weekdays first and then added the dates underneath. And to make sure I don't make any mistakes, I referenced my phone calendar. I actually think I've gotten pretty good at writing these mini calendars because I often add them to my weekly spreads, so I'm quite used to them at this point, and I managed to not make any mistakes as far as I can tell. And that's my yearly overview all done. I'm really excited to fill it with new memories, and let's move on to the next page. Last year I included a monthly theme spread, which I actually loved filling out every month, so I decided to include it again for this year. I didn't really change up the layout a lot, so I just made 12 boxes that are 7 by 5 spaces tall, and then here I'm adding a background for the headers to each of them so they end up being spaced out really nicely. I made the borders again with a ruler and the dark green, and I left one space between the header and the sections. Then for the headers I used the stamps again to keep things consistent, and I tried to place the letters pretty evenly. It doesn't always work out, but that's fine. June ended up being pretty off-center, but I think it adds a certain charm, or at least that's what I'm trying to tell myself. To balance them out a little bit, I added a star to each side, and I think that ended up working pretty well. And then for every month I will just draw a mini version of each theme I come up with, which is super fun to look back on at the end of the year. Now on the right page I wanted to include a completely new spread that I actually came up with myself, or at least I haven't seen it before. So since I pretty much always do the same types of weekly layouts, I wanted to make a spread to write down all the spacing for the ones I use most frequently so that I don't have to go back and count the little boxes every time. I didn't make a header for all of the spreads in this setup, but for this one I did because I wanted to incorporate the stamps again, and also because the spread wouldn't fill out the whole page. So the way I wanted to make this was to have a miniature version of each of the layouts with just some boxes to indicate where I would place my sections. So I made 6 miniature spreads using the dark green for the borders of the pages. The spreads are 10 spaces wide and 7 spaces tall, which is probably not the right ratio, but it's what ended up working best. Then for the sections, I used the light peach and the light green marker to color them in so that I can kind of see which layout it is. So for example, I use a layout a lot that just has 8 equal sections, or one that has smaller squared sections, and so on. Basically, it's just a very simplified version of the basic layout and spacing that I use to make my weekly spreads, so I really hope that makes sense. This method is actually something similar to what I learned when I was studying graphic design for how to make and plan an appealing layout, and it's just to block out where the text and the pictures go, so it's a very simple and basic principle, but that's basically how I make all of my spreads in my bullet journal, so hopefully it's helpful to some of you as well. Then for the actual useful part, I wrote down all the spacing for the vertical and horizontal axis on the bottom and the left side of these sections so that I can refer back to this page and have them all in one space, and I don't have to flip through my journal every time to find a specific one. I can already tell that this will be very useful to me personally because I already used this guide to make one of my December weekly spreads, so I'm super excited about this one. Now, since it was looking a little bit empty, I decided to draw a bunch more of those colored blobs kind of behind the sections, which I thought looked really pretty, and I tried to vary the shapes a lot so that they don't look too similar. Then I decided to also draw some little doodles along the middle of the page just to add a bit more decoration and also to incorporate the theme again. And on the bottom I also added more blobs, but I also used that orange marker and added some more doodles on top, which together with the header on the top frames the page a bit nicer. I think this ended up being one of my favorite spreads in the setup, but yeah, moving on, I only did 2 more pages because again, I don't tend to fill out my yearly spreads as much. I definitely wanted to include a page for my YouTube channel though, so I did the same style of header because I didn't feel like I would need the whole page for the spread, and I just wanted to include another growth tracker like I did for last year, where I can track when I reach certain subscriber milestones and also some sections for ideas on the bottom. For the growth tracker, I used the 3 lighter shades for the borders of 15 little boxes, so I have 3 rows and 5 columns, which is pretty much the same layout as last year. Again, I made a sort of pattern with the colors, just alternating between them because I think it makes the spread look a little bit more interesting. And then I left 2 spaces underneath each box where I can write down the date of when I actually reach a milestone. Speaking of, we actually hit 12,000 subscribers recently, so first of all thank you, and I will also include it in this tracker because the one for last year only went as far as 10,000 because I really didn't expect my channel to grow beyond that, so of course I'm super grateful. And in case you're new to my channel, definitely consider joining this little growing community if you want to see what I come up with for the next year. So yeah, I just wrote down the numbers from 11,000 to 25,000, and I'm really interested and excited to see how this new year will go. Underneath, I just wanted to make 2 simple sections for some theme ideas and video ideas because I always end up writing them down on my phone, but I thought it would be nice to just have a designated space in my journal instead. I used the light peach and the green shade again for the headers and to color in every single line of the sections just to give them some more color, and then the titles actually ended up being the exact perfect amount of letters for the width of the sections, so that was super satisfying. Now lastly, I wanted to include another new spread for me, which will be for my routines, because I'm really trying to build a strong morning and nighttime routine at the moment, as well as some sort of weekly reset routine for the weekend, where I can just kind of get ready for the next week. Again, I made the header in the same style to keep things consistent, and then I just started by writing down my ideal morning routine. Of course, this is going to be very different for everyone, but these are just some of the things that make me feel good in the morning and ready to start the day. Please keep in mind I don't manage to do these things every day. Some days are just a bit harder than the others, and sometimes you wake up late or you're tired, but this is just something I can refer back to when I forget what makes me feel more energized and good in the morning. I used the thicker brush tip of the light green marker to give this section a border, and then next to it on the right I added some more of those colored shapes, and I also used the stamps to write AM since it's for my morning routine. I also drew some more plant doodles, and then I did the same exact thing underneath for my nighttime or PM routine, and I just placed it on the right instead for a bit of variation. My nighttime routine is definitely a bit shorter, and I also haven't really gotten into the habit of doing it on a more regular basis, but I guess that's one of my goals for the new year. By the way, I don't make a goals page because I think it's better not to wait for like the next year or the next month or the next week to start working on your goals, but just to work on them right away. So that's just my personal opinion. Of course, feel free to include it in your setup. Lastly, on the very bottom, I wanted to write down a weekly reset routine, which I included in one of my setups from 2022. I think it was in August, and I split it up into 3 categories of things to do, which is what I did here as well. So for self-care, organizing, and cleaning. Keep in mind these are just some things I can do to feel more prepared, but not actually a list of what I have to do. Since I work as a freelancer on YouTube and for my other job on the side, I usually don't have a set work schedule because I'm also in university, so sometimes it's just not that easy to plan my week. So when I end up working on the weekend, which I do quite often, I forget to take care of myself and just to take some time off every now and then. That's why I wanted to make a list of some things I can do outside of just working that can make me feel less overwhelmed and can also help me to have a better work-life balance. I didn't fill out all the lines because I thought I could add some other things whenever I think of them, so I just left every second line empty for now. But yeah, let me know if you have a reset routine or a morning and nighttime routine. I'd love to know and hear what you think. And that is it for my 2023 setup. I'm so happy with how it turned out, and I hope you guys like it as well, so let's do a little flip through. Definitely let me know which page was your favorite, what you want to include in your own setup for the new year, any theme ideas or questions. I genuinely love hearing from you guys. I read all of my comments and I try to respond to as many as I can. And I just also wanted to let you know that I appreciate every single one of you, so I really hope you enjoyed this video. Again, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I can't wait to share my next setups with you guys. So thank you as always for watching, and I hope I'll see you again next time. Bye!